Okay, so are we ready? I'm going to talk about Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager I'm going to try and keep it from a developer's perspective, because there are loads of courses and tutorials and whatever about Google Analytics that's good, but that are all about like how you do reporting and how you set it up very basically, and almost nothing about how you actually implement it in the code, because you need to do that as well. I previously worked at a web agency which had a really strong focus on CRO, conversion rate optimization, and so I worked very closely with an analytics team as a developer. And what I first learned is that, analytics is complex. You thought you knew Google Analytics. You probably did not. There are so many things in there which you probably don't know. And I'm not really sure what level everybody's on, so I'm just very verbosely going to say that this is what you probably know. You know that there are tracking codes. You know that there is a behavior or an audience overview tab. You probably know the real-time view, the goals, at least that there are goals. Maybe you don't know exactly what a goal is, but you know that there are goals. And you know that there are properties views and you can filter those. And I don't know, do you know all of this? Is there something you don't know, just kind of in general? Anyone? Is this all familiar? Yeah. This is why I just assumed. And I'm going to assume you don't know events and event tracking. I'm not going to explain all of this because firstly, I'm not an expert, and secondly, it's going to take all day. But events and event tracking, measuring goals equals measuring conversions, segments or segmenting, metric comparisons of dimensions, funnel visualization, sources and referrals, attribution, campaign, site speed, measuring site speed, e-commerce tracking, and site speed metrics, SEO metrics, and you can actually track use across devices. Those are some of the things that are available in analytics. Did anybody know this? Yes, some of it. Not all of it, maybe. Or all of it, I don't know. So this is what I'm going to bring up. I'm just going to touch data-driven development, as could be called. And then I'm just going to kind of touch on essential analytics, just so everybody's on the same level. And also there is sometimes some confusion about some concepts, so I just want to clarify it. Going to bring up two cool things, I think at least, and I'm also going to just do a basic GTM setup so everyone understands what that's about, because it's a really awesome tool. So first off, why do we use Google Analytics? Like, what's the reason for it?
Because it's biggest on the market.
Pardon?
Because it's biggest on the market.
Biggest on the market?
And free.
Free? Yeah. But what's the reason we want to use an analytics tool in general?
Track the customers. Track
Track users, yeah, absolutely. I would say we want to measure the results of the website, and we want to evaluate why things work and why it doesn't work, so that we can work with data-driven development. So we can actually prioritize what's most important right now. Is it the product page that performs the best? Maybe we shouldn't put our focus into improving the product page. Maybe we should put our focus into improving the checkout, because that's not performing as well. So you can prioritize what's most important. And also, we always test our theories. So if we change something, we want to see that, okay, this actually worked. We don't just take a chance and hope it works and hope for the best. So data-driven development is all about making decisions based on facts, and that's why we have an analytics tool. First off, I just want to mention that there are two analytics libraries, analytics.js and GA.js. You always want to use analytics.js because that's the universal analytics tracking library, and that's what you use nowadays. So GA.js is just a legacy library. So some essential analytics. Let's just jump right in, start with accounts, properties, and views. This is really simple, but sometimes people confuse them. So we have accounts, that's one level. Accounts owns properties, which have a unique ID. You can give other accounts access to different properties, but they're always owned by a single account. You can also give access on an account level, so account B can have access to all account A's properties. Data is then sent to properties, so it's always the properties that receives data, and then it's reported and filtered in the views. And this is usually a common setup, that you have a master view, you have all website data, and you have test views. And that's because the master view is always what you look at when you report things. In case something would go wrong, you filter out the wrong data or something, you have an all website data view. So that's no filtering, no goals, etc. Just plain data. And then you have a test view when you try out new things in the reporting settings, so you don't mess up the master view. You've probably seen this tab sometime if you work with Google Analytics. This is the first view that comes up when you log in. This is from our own website, linasmatkasse.se. And you get some basic information. You get the number of sessions, number of users, the bounce rate, language, country, you know, the basic information. And I think most of you have seen it. And then if you want to fetch the tracking code, you've probably been in the admin view, which looks like this. You have the account in the first column, properties, and this is where you find the tracking code. And then you have views on the right, and that's where you set up, for example, goals and filtering. Also, I just want to mention the tracking script, which I'm sure most of you have pasted in sometime into some website somewhere. And I want to focus on these two last lines here, create and send page view. Create basically sends or creates or kind of connects the tracking script to the property, because properties are where we send data. So in case you already have a tracking script, but you have another property ID, you can just actually change this ID and it will be connected to a different analytics property. And that's why filtering is very important, because anyone can actually send any property ID into here and they would send data to our site from a completely different site maybe. So we need to filter out firstly so the data is only from our domain. And then send page view. That means we're sending a page view. We register that, okay, a new page was viewed. And the thing is, this script is run when the page loads, only when the page loads. So if we have a single page application, the page doesn't reload, right? So the page view won't be registered. Does everybody follow so far? Good. So it's really simple to send the second page view. You just run the script again, and you send in the location path name, which is enabled in JavaScript by default. And then you will register a new page view. And you can hook this onto the, I don't know, React router. I'm not sure if there is like a hook in native JavaScript that hooks onto location changes or browser history push. Maybe there is. So you can hook that onto that one in that case. And I also want to mention events and event tracking, because basically the only two things as a developer that you touch in Google Analytics is page views and events. That's pretty much what you need to work with. And events in Analytics is really simple as well. They consist of a category and an action. Those are mandatory. And then you have a label and a value, which are optional. So if a user views a video, you put it in the category video, you put the action to play, and maybe you want to send in what video they're viewing, and maybe we know that okay, they watched this video that's worth 5 kroners, so we send in 5. And maybe watching a video isn't the best example for having a value, but for example, if we have an e-commerce and the user checks out and makes a purchase, we know exactly how much that was worth. So by sending in the event that, okay, the user made a purchase, we can send in the order value. And by that, we can get the exact amount of money we earn from this purchase, or from all purchases actually, right into Google Analytics. Events are, of course, viewed in the reporting view or in the reporting section of Google Analytics. So this is, for example, from our site, we have a button-click starting page category, so we can see how often it's triggered, and we can measure that to a secondary dimension, for example, so we can compare, for example, which browser version clicked the button the most, or what source they came from. So does Facebook users click it more than Twitter users, for example? And also you set up later goals connected to events. In the reporting you will get something called conversions. I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with it. It's basically when the user fulfills your purpose of the site. So if your site is an e-commerce, they buy your products. If it's a B2B company, maybe they book a meeting as a conversion. And you set up conversions connected to events or to, for example, the location. So if the user is on a thanks page, you can set up in reporting that the thanks page is a goal. So whenever they visit it, the thanks page, that's a conversion. So I think that's the most essential stuff that everybody needs to know. Are there any questions so far? No questions? I guess that's good.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Filtering. I've seen that on like private pages where you do analytics, there comes in a lot of like spam. So does that filter products?
Exactly. Or it can. I mean, it's still possible to send in like spam to Google Analytics, but you can filter out bots. Google works the magic and knows which visitors are bots and not somehow. And that can filter out some of the spam. And also, a lot of these spam actually come from different sites. So the spammer has set up your analytics setup on another site and send a lot of traffic to that. So that can show up in your reporting if you haven't filtered it. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. So this question was, there are a lot of spam in analytics, in small analytics setup sometimes. Can you filter that out some way? Yeah, let's move on to the cool stuff then. First off, I'd like to bring up cross-device user tracking, because it's actually possible to determine what who a user is based on their user ID. So we can track users and their behavior across devices. Because normally Google Analytics, as most of you know, uses cookies to identify the user. But we can send our own user ID to Google Analytics, and it will know that, okay, in the desktop version and the mobile customer zone version, we know that this is the same user because we got another user ID. And that can give us more correct statistics on how many users we have, what their behavior is, and also we can see that, okay, more users convert on the desktop site, but they visit the mobile site first, so that's maybe important still, but how do we boost sales in the mobile app? There are two ways to do it. Either you send it when you create the Google Analytics object, or you can just set it afterwards, for example, when they've logged in, and Google Analytics will kind of register it and change the data. Yeah, and another thing is experimenting, which I found really cool as well and really useful. And it's not about playing around with Google Analytics. It's about split testing, A/B testing. And that means having a theory and testing it that's connected to data-driven development. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but I still want to bring it up because Google Analytics feature of this is really, really good, I think. What it does is basically it gives you the reporting feature and a split feature. So it splits the traffic for you and it reports the results, nothing else. So in contrast to other A/B testing tools such as Optimizely that pulls in jQuery, modifies the DOM based on a drag and drop interface, which is really good for marketing, not as good for site performance and for developers. Google Analytics just lets you specify your URLs to different variants by yourself. So you can actually perform the variant changes both server-side and client-side. So if we want to test that, okay, if we make this button green instead of red, that's going to boost conversion. We have that theory. Then we create two variants. One that is the original with the red button, and another one which is our theory that it's going to boost sales, and that's the green button. We split those two into different URLs, and we render different versions based on the URL. And that's pretty much it. It's really simple. So are there more questions on Google Analytics? Because otherwise I'll move on to Google Tag Manager. Okay, good. I'm pretty sure that most of you are not as familiar with Google Tag Manager. And it's a real simple tool, so I'm going to walk through it in like 10 minutes and you're going to know Google Tag Manager after that. So it's basically about managing scripts and events in a way that is you just don't paste the code in, basically. Instead, you add a tracking script that you get from GTM, and you paste that into your DOM. You remove, for example, your analytics script if you were going to implement Google Analytics through Tag Manager instead. Yeah, and Google somehow works the magic in injecting the scripts from Google Tag Manager. So, Tag Manager is basically 4 concepts. It's containers, triggers, tags, and variables. So containers are basically the same thing as properties in Google Analytics. It's just like a way of identifying that this site is this tracking code. Triggers are when something happens. So for example, the history changes, the users click a button, something that happens. Tags are whatever you do. So it can be trigger page view in Analytics or trigger an event. It can be run an alert dialog. It can be, I don't know, just add the script when the page loads. And we also have variables, which are both on what something happens. So triggers just tells you that, okay, when the user clicks. And then you kind of filter it with a variable. So the variable says when the trigger says when the user clicks. And you add a variable that says, for example, on this button ID. But it's also like traditional variables with a static constant, which can be, for example, your analytics property ID. I find it a really good practice to just add your property ID as a variable. So yeah, I figured I'll make an example on how to work Google Analytics, work with Google Tag Manager. So, first off, you log into Tag Manager, select your property, and we'll create a variable for our analytics property ID. And it's really simple. You just click on variables, click on new, enter a nice name, click on this box here. You'll get a dialog where you can choose constant. You enter your value into the form, and you click on save. It's right up to the right. And then we'll need to create a tag because that's what happens. We need to register a page view. So we create a tag by clicking on tags, surprise, clicking on new, select or enter a nice name, and we click on tag configuration and choose a tag. And when you click on that, you get the option to choose universal analytics. So we choose that. And you enter your analytics property ID. If you click on this little thing with a plus sign on it, it's going to show all your variables you have. And as we entered our analytics property ID, that's going to end up there. Page view is selected by default. And then we need to select the trigger. And you click on triggering. And you select all pages because that's there by default. It's always there because that's when the page loads. And that's when we want to register the page view. After that, we just need to save. So we click on save, and it's there. Simple. And we also, another thing, this is not going to show up in production until we publish it. So we go on publish, right up to the right, and we're going to get a dialog where you can enter a version name. I think that's good practice. So you can always go back to a previous version if something screws up. And you can see all your changes you did. Right now we just added the analytics page view. And then we go to publish. I don't know where my mouse is, there. And it's going to save. So what if you have a single page application? This just loads on page load, right? So in that case, we need to listen, like I said before, on the history change. So for that, we'll need to create a custom trigger that listens on history change. So we go to triggers, we click on new, enter a nice name, click on tag configuration, and we go to history change. And that's going to save. Click on save. And then we go to tags, click on new, enter the same thing, universal analytics, add a tracking ID, and add the page view. And then we need to select our own trigger. So we click on triggering, and then our trigger is going to show up here. So we select all history changes. So we select that. It's going to be there. Click on save. And that's it. We publish again. That's pretty much all I have to say. That's Google Tag Manager in a nutshell. If you want to do like events tracking or something a little more complex, I have some really good resources on both the absolute beginner's guide for Google Analytics if you felt like you didn't really follow some of this. And Pluralsight has a really good deep dive into analytics, and their official documentation is really good as well. And I'd also recommend this Optimize Smart article if you're interested in deep diving into Google Tag Manager. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening. Yeah, sure. Is there anyone that has a question?
Yes.
Okay.
You mentioned like handling the identity on the back end, if I remember correctly, like on the server side.
We can handle. If we can handle the identity on the server side, we can handle or in what context?
The user ID.
The user ID. Yeah, so we'll need to add that to the JavaScript API. So it's going to have to be rendered in the front end, but we can use our own user ID that comes from our backend. Is that an answer to your question?
Yes. I have a follow-up question.
Follow-up question, sure.
Do we expose the user ID to the client by doing this?
Do we expose the user ID to the client by doing this? Well, yeah, because it needs to be injected with JavaScript. And JavaScript is always exposed to the client. So technically, yes, but you could always do this in a nice way by hiding it with a variable that you fetch via Ajax or something.
Why would you want to hide it?
Why would you want to hide it? I think that's a question for Mike, actually.
Well, if you use UIDs, then maybe you don't need to hide it, but displaying like an incremental ID of your user base is generally not a good idea, unless you have some other strategy of escaping it. I don't know how to pronounce it. Like, oh, ID 1120. Okay, so we have about 1100 customers. Stuff like that. It's just good information to broadcast to anyone with a browser.
Okay. But then then the problem is more what sort of ID you use.
Yes, but my thought when asking the question was more like, does analytics do something with the like supplied data you pass into it, like custom user IDs when it sends from the network? Like how that was more my kind of line of thinking. Does it, I don't know, encrypt it, serialize it, hash it somehow?
Well, the Google Analytics transfer is always performed over HTTPS, so technically it's encrypted.
Oh, so you need to have a certificate on your server to use this feature?
Oh no, not on. You don't need HTTPS on your server, but towards analytics, it's going to be encrypted, the data.
Right.
Any other questions? I think we're